people with this personality profile tend to experience a lot of aggressiveness, hostility, defensiveness. But interestingly, these individuals do a relatively good job on a day-to-day basis of not displaying it to people. So this isn't someone who's walking around consistently hostile, throwing things where it's visible to other people, but they're still experiencing those emotions inside. In times when they feel like they've been wronged in some sort of way, or when someone has done something to hurt them that they perceive as hurting them in any kind of way, the way that it's described in the literature is they have these violent outbursts that are described as seething, as very angry. And what they tend to do, what this profile suggests, is that these individuals tend to externalize blame. So for example, I acted out this way because that person deserved it. So they externalize it. They say, it's not my fault. I didn't act this way because I have these strong emotions inside. I act this way because someone did something to me. That's how they're able to conceptualize it and justify it in their mind. When I first started reviewing the records, there was indication in those records that there was a sense of immaturity that was present. For example, in Ms. Arias' booking profile, the way that she took the picture, she kind of smiled as though it was a high school photo rather than a booking picture that you would typically see. This to me was strange. I found it to be strange and immature. There was also the things that happened surrounding that suggested that there was, again, some immaturity there, such as her parents had indicated that she was described as being happy as hell when they came to visit her in jail. There was behaviors like this that were aberrant, that were strange, and it made me wonder whether there was some sort of intellectual deficit there that could be contributing to this, which is why I gave the intelligence test. I diagnosed her on Axis 2 as borderline personality disorder.
What does that mean?
Generally, borderline personality disorder, you can think of it similar to what we see in teenagers often. This sense of immaturity and what's called emotional lability, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But generally, it's about instability. There's unstable interpersonal relationships, unstable emotions, and an unstable sense of identity, meaning who am I as a person? There's this constant fluctuation. There's a lot of manipulation that's involved with people who have borderline personality disorder, and a large sense of immaturity. You can, again, think about a teenager. What we see in people with borderline personality disorder is that they engage in behaviors to try to keep people close to them. But ironically, these kinds of behaviors often push people away. So in the case of Ms. Arias, this was demonstrated throughout her relationship, well, throughout life, and also with Mr. Alexander. For example, after they broke up, when they broke off their relationship, she then moved to Mesa to be closer to him. This fear of abandonment. This tendency to overstep boundaries, to be intrusive. Ms. Arias herself notified me that she had checked his Facebook without his permission, read text messages without his permission, engaging in these kinds of behaviors of, don't leave me, let me see what you're doing, I want you to be near me. There was indication from friends that highlighted her tendency to engage in these intrusive behaviors by spying on him, by being intrusive with his space in general. She had a very strong tendency to go from boyfriend to boyfriend, one after another, which is also another example of fear of abandonment that I just highlighted. What I found is in these relationships, there was a very strong tendency to idealize the men that she was with. For example, she had indicated to me that Mr. Alexander was not faithful to her during the relationship, but nonetheless, she still had this devout love for him. And you can see even within her journals, the way that she talks about her boyfriends and her partners in general, it has this very adolescent, immature, for lack of a better word, a saccharine kind of feel to it, a very strong, sweet, wanting to make them happy feel to it, doing anything possible, keeping them idealized despite what was going on in their relationship. Her ex-boyfriend, Daryl, was talking about her pattern of behaviors. He had indicated that there was a point in which she had changed the color of her hair, bought a certain car, and acted a certain way to be consistent with his ex-wife. Again, this tendency to shift who she is. We find that people who have borderline personality disorder tend to have this prolonged sense of just feeling empty, just feeling like there's nothing there, despite the fact that there's all this emotional turmoil that does go on inside. They have this sense of just being empty. And I specifically asked Ms. Arias about that, who indicated that she's felt that way since adolescence, just this sense of emptiness.
Tell us whether or not the defendant had any suicidal behavior and whether or not she had any ideation about that.
I fortunately had access to Ms. Arias's diary, and throughout her diary, beginning in 1995, there was consistent notations about the desire to not be alive, to engage in suicidal behavior, thoughts about it.
And so did she meet this criteria?
Yes, because there was that pattern, she did meet that criteria. Several of her boyfriends described her, in fact, all of them, of the information that I have had access to, they all described her as having very quick shifting emotions, going from happy to mad to sad very quickly. And interestingly, I saw that myself within her journal entries. Within the same day, I could see a person who was very happy to shifting to be very upset, very sad, and within one day, very quickly. Inappropriate, intense anger.
And did you find anything in her writings where she admitted that she had this inappropriate, intense anger?
Yes, she identified it in an email to Mr. Alexander.
And does it discuss her inappropriate, intense anger?
It does. However, you already know the secret. I don't need to remind you, but you are so powerful and you can turn the situation around at any time. I found out, much to my regret, that my anger is very destructive.
Slow down a little bit.
I've never beaten up anybody over it, but I've kicked holes in the walls, kicked down doors, smashed windows, broken things. It hurts people, and it hurts me. It lowers my vibration and attracts unwanted, lower vibrational situations and people into my life. So I strive every day to be the bigger person and be a living example and choose the right and see everything through a filter of love. But it doesn't always work that way. I mess up. Sometimes I forget who I am. But I will never stop striving to be Christ-like as much as I possibly can.
Is that part of the inappropriate, intense anger that you were talking about?
Yes, that's one example.